Onegaishimasu. So let's start with Zazen meditation. So whether you're standing or seated, the structure is the same. Nice long spine. The shoulders sit straight down. Chin is in slightly to open and lengthen the back of the neck. And typically for Zazen, we have one hand on top of the other, thumb tips touching, and either resting in your lap or resting on your belly. It's good generally to have the eyes open. Eyes closed, we'll tend to nod off. We'll go into daydreaming. But we don't want to be darting our attention around or either fixating on a particular object or spot that tends to create tension in the mind and the body. So we use our peripheral vision just as much as our direct vision. That's called a soft gaze or an open gaze. So aware of your alignment of the spine, body structure is open. Let the weight settle underside while maintaining an upright, open, spacious structure. Eyes looking at a slight angle down. Again, open, soft gaze. Consciously releasing the abdomen. Watching the breath move in the abdomen. So mindful of the posture and mindful of the centered breathing. And it's good to relate to the out breath as the releasing breath. Consciously releasing tensions on the out breath. Let the back crown of the head float up to the sky and the tailbone be anchored or enter the ground. Good. Let's go into some structure and opening of the body. So a light horse stance. Hang out again. You can imagine that you're hanging, but that hook on top of your head that you're hanging from is again towards the back. So you can either imagine the crown of the head floating up, and that's again the back crown. Otherwise, we tend to raise the chin. So it's towards the back, and that, if anything, drops the chin, makes it even with the ground. Really what it does is it opens, lengthens the neck. So either the floating from the back crown or the hook that you're suspended from is towards the back top of the head. Then just let everything drop from there. Let the shoulders drop from there. Let the weight exit the ground through your legs and feet. Roll your elbows forward. That will pull the shoulders down even more. And basically just hang out here, allowing the weight to exit freely through the legs. And if you can align the lower back in the way that we talk about quite a bit, you might notice that when you click into that position, more weight can freely fall. So releasing the waist area and aligning the lower back so it's virtually straight allows more weight and tension to drop into the lower body and then into the ground. We talked about the elbows rolling forward, can pull the shoulders down, but even better is if you can activate that rolling or that movement of the arms to come from the lower body. So as you drop the tailbone or as you release the weight, you translate that into an expanding of your shape. So it's actually not the arms that are rolling your arms forward, it's dropping, sinking and dropping, and you connect that consciously, intentionally connect that to a rolling of the elbows and opening up of the joints. It's good to check once in a while to make sure the knees are indeed directly over the feet. It's going to be a tendency for them to roll in. And again, with further developing of your awareness, you will notice that when you get those knees literally mechanically directly over the feet, that opens up your body structure, your skeletal shape, allowing more weight to fall freely, allowing a more spacious quality and feeling in your shape. So getting those knees right over the feet. And then translate that to your upper body. Remind yourself to really release the abdomen and breathe freely in the abdomen, because this creates physical tension and mental tension trying to do this. Coming back to release and open. Again, as always, feel free to unmute and ask any and all questions you might have. Don't worry how small it might seem or detailed the question might be. It's all an opportunity to discuss further information.
So can I ask, this is quite a detail-y detail, but I noticed that I shift how I do this. Like, what's the sense of dropping your tailbone and that nice kind of like the grounded through the outside of the feet, so there's sort of this bridge. What I noticed that I shift is where the top of like my femur head, like where that bone, like the kind of rotational angle within the joint seems like there's options. Even though it feels like my, tailbone's hanging, that there's degrees of which that hip waist, hip joint could close or open. Is it the intent that it should be expanding open? Because that's a different feeling than having it a little bit collapsed or a little bit still kind of bent. Does that make sense?
Yes. That is an excellent detailed question for sure. Because this is really important, especially, it's not that important maybe the first few times you do it. After the first few times of doing things, you want to go deeper and get more refined. So this is a perfect question. So it's not just, again, just hang it and leave it. Because first of all, just hanging has many detailed aspects of what you're talking about here. Everything does, right? So specifically with this, let's work with this a little bit. So just because we say hang the tailbone, hang the spine, or point the tailbone towards the ground, and we say all these things, it doesn't mean that we're doing it quote unquote correctly or doing it quote unquote well. It's a process of approaching. And over time, through your developing mind-body awareness, mind-body connection, you can start to self-correct, intuitively self-refine. And also, even before that level, the words that have been repeated over and over again start to make more sense. So it's a very crude approaching to everything we do at first, right? Because as detailed as what I said here, sometimes I go into more detail, physical detail. It's really not enough. So this is leading us into more. So this is really good to work with. So let's kind of contrast a little bit and exaggerate. So we're not going to worry about the arms for now, just let them hang. We have a very light horse stance. In other words, the knees are slightly bent. So lower body is the same structure we had. Again, let's just, because it is so important, let's make sure our knees aren't the tiniest little bit rolled in, or the arches aren't the tiniest bit rolled in, but they're repelled away from each other, maybe energizing or emphasizing the outside edges of the feet. Not that we want to stand on the blades, outside blades of our feet. That's going the other way, too much the other way. But we do want to make sure that we're not collapsing in. So another way of putting it is a hollow in the arch. Okay, so that's taking care of the knees. Now, the question at hand. So right now, as best you can, let your spine hang, dangle directly, vertically down as best you can. The reason why I said that's not enough information, or we approach it very generally, crudely at first, because one person's hanging vertically might really be this. Another person's sense of hanging vertically might be this, and it's not really correct. But your awareness will refine over time. So as best you can, hanging out nice and vertical. Tailbone pointing towards the ground. Again, that can have a huge spectrum in really what each person's doing, right? Just because you say that doesn't mean it's actually happening. So let's help refine that, develop that awareness, and refine that angle, that shape. So it might be really hard to really know definitively and really, again, finely where your tailbone is actually pointing or what angle you have here. Am I really fairly flat here, or am I not? So again, exaggeration and contrasting is very, very helpful. So roll your pelvis and your tailbone forward so it's very clearly for you that it's too much forward. And notice where it puts the weight on your feet. If you draw your tailbone forward or tilt the pelvis a little bit too much forward, feel the weight, the pressure on the bones of your feet go towards the balls of your feet and then towards the toes. So when you're on the balls of the feet, the tailbone is tilted too much forward, or the hip is too much tilted. That's too far. Certainly if you feel it on the toe, that's way too far. But even when it's right on the balls of the feet, that's too far forward. So if we go the other way and let the tailbone swing back a little bit until you feel the weight mainly at the heels. That's too far back for the tailbone, or too locked for the joint, the hip joint. So it's too much like this. So the hip is too much tilted, the tailbone is pointed a little bit too much back. Let's just do that a couple more times. Too much forward, feel the weight, pressure of weight on the bottoms of your feet. Slide forward on the feet until it's into the balls of the feet. And notice the feeling of the angle of the tailbone or the hip. So that's too much forward. Having it go back. Until you feel the weight of your feet at your heel. And then keep doing that forward and back, and make a little bit smaller each time, not quite to the balls of the feet, not quite all the way back to the heels. Almost like a tiny little pendulum. And just like we do arm swings and then let them gradually come to a vertical stillness, do that with your hip cage or your tailbone. Let it swing forward and back. Forward, that's clearly too much forward. Back, a little bit too much back. Swinging forward, it's a little bit too much forward. Swinging back, a little bit too much back. Smaller and smaller. Until you're more somewhere in the middle. Getting smaller. And now we're probably getting closer to what we want, closer to correct. Probably not exactly or perfect yet. And can't get it perfect because there maybe, for example, be too much tension in the muscles of the lower back. So the tailbone and hips can't really be released yet. So it could never really be totally hanging vertically because the muscles haven't lengthened and released yet. But now you're getting closer to that. And you know, well, that's too far and that's too far. So to also address your question, Cheryl, in this approach, there's a real sense that the hips are hanging. It's like a hip cage is hanging on your spine. So it becomes almost like you're not doing anything, effortless, like there's a true hangingness, not a sinking into something that's held, but a hanging, and almost like it could be the slightest gust of wind, there could be a swaying. And that's that freedom of movement. That's that gyroscope or that mercurial ball that will move at the slightest contact. It's very much back to the image in Tai Chi, where the idea that a sparrow lands on the Tai Chi master's hand, and the sparrow can't ever take off again to fly, because the Tai Chi person is so sensitive and so light and responsive that that little sparrow can't get enough push off, can't get enough thrust to take into flight, to go into flight, because it's so free to move. And so it's the same with this, that's hanging, and it becomes this quicksilver gyroscope. It's just swiveling and hanging. It can swivel in any direction. So it's really a letting go and a free fallingness, a free hangingness. Although we're back again to the necessity of strength to maintain that for any length of time. Strengthen legs, strengthen structure. If we don't have that stamina, that strength, then we're going to be clamping on with everything else. So any comments or questions about that? So how much is this closed? How much is this open? How much this is physically bent, the qua, depends on how much I bend the knees. So physically it depends on that. But as far as where the hips go, basically it's free falling, true hanging. It becomes neutral, completely neutral. How is that feeling, or any comments about that?
Yeah, I mean, what's opening up for me as we explore that, because I think part of what was happening was in finding a certain resting down, that I was feeling a bit of ground force come up, which then changed my hip joint a little bit. In exploring this way, I'm sort of feeling like there's rotational possibilities at the ready, that this ability to like turn around my own axis becomes easy and simple, rather than a pushing. Like, yes, I can push into the ground, but I don't have to, because it could just happen.
Right, just happen in free space, hanging in free space,
Yeah.
And in any direction. That's very, very gyroscope-like. Any direction, it is swiveling.
Yeah.
Now, what you said about the ground force coming up was tending to do what?
Well, I just at a certain point, I think I was successful enough in hanging, and because I would say of my Feldenkrais work, it was really activating the outside, the kind of cuboid bone, and then I would feel this up thrust of, I presume, ground force that would kind of come up and again affect a little bit my hips, and it didn't take me out of the hanging, but it was like I every time I would find it, I would get this shift, and I wasn't entirely sure what was going on with that. But this exploration kind of, I would say, clarifies past that connection.
Okay.
Because definitely my knees weren't rolling in. Like, I'm feeling a really vibrant connection up through the bones, up through, into the hips from the ground.
Okay, nice. So I'll jump on the aspect of the ground force as well, since you mentioned it. So I'll just touch upon that as well. And again, this might not be available to everyone, but it's good if you just go through the motions, fake it till you make it, because this will be laying little seeds of experience that will just bolster your future experiences. So if we come back into this and hang out, notice if the spine, if the tailbone is tilted too much forward, bringing the weight through the balls of the feet, too much back, heels, somewhere in the middle there. And if you just let it just sway forward and back, that helps release the tensions in the hip and lower back. Anyway, just a little swing, just like we do with the arm swings and the arm drops. Okay, so now, if that then opens up experience of ground force, which is really good, and you notice it's starting to change things or angles specifically here in the hip. So what I would like you to do is exactly the same process of what we just did, that of releasing, opening, and nothing ing on the way up. So that ground force can empty and open this even more. So exactly the same process or feeling, hanging becomes zero gravity, nothing in there. Let the ground force move more freely, just like we want the weight to exit, free fall through your legs and feet and hips. Now let the ground force move more freely with nothing in the way, and this will only add to and accentuate the same sensations you had with the dropping. And now it becomes a two-way. It's a two-way process now. It's a two-way avenue. So if you can allow that ground force to move even more freely, more like mercury just flowing through, no friction, that'll open up the hips even more and allow the hanging even more. So that upward ground path, ground force, can have has the same effect, opens and releases, empties. And I'll just mention this now, this requires the opening of the leg. It's like we talked about opening the hips or releasing the waist, pardon me. I touched upon just very briefly. If you can open up the waist, relax a bit here, allows more weight and stuff to fall through. As we can open up the legs, it allows more ground force to move through. So now I just wanted to touch upon this kind of a subtle thing at first. It's both things at once, yin and yang. Opening up the legs, specifically the thighs right now, to allow the ground force up. It can sound like a contrast, and it is, to what we say building up strength. And we talk about we have to have the strength to have good structure. We have to have the strength to be able to relax. To go a little further into that, it's a little more subtle and paradoxical. We want the legs, the thighs, and the entire leg to become open and empty. In Tai Chi, when we're talking about doing danyus or Tai Chi squats, we talk about not contracting the thighs, but having the thighs stay open. The thighs, the legs become like empty tubes. So that's a different kind of strength than just muscular contraction strength. And we're start getting to the realm of fascia as well. I just want to touch upon that is if I mentioned that upward ground force can come up and through and release the hips and tailbone. For that to increase, I need to unblock the legs and the thighs. And so the strength and the length in the thighs is a different kind of strength than this kind of tenseness and contraction. It's an open tubular shape. It's open and empty, but still has to be strong, not strong muscularly this way. Anyway, I don't want to go too much in that direction unless there's any comments or questions with that. So if you can take those feelings here, and you may need to come out of that and take a little rest and re-enter it many times, feel free to do that. See if you can translate that releasing, that hanging, to an opening in your shoulder joints, an expanding of your elbows forward. So then if you have any sense of that, then you're moving away from just rolling your elbows physically forward. That's good. Just like pushing your shoulders down physically it's quite crude, very mechanical and crude and muscular, but it's better than having your shoulders muscularly contracted way up here by your ears. Pushing them down even muscularly is going in the right direction. Just like talking about the back of the neck, pushing the chin back, pushing the neck back to get it more straight and long. That's a step in the right direction. That's a step. But eventually you want that happening energetically and intentionally. Raising back of the crown, dropping tailbone, opens it up. So eventually you want to have that hangingness creating an openness. And let's go further into opening up the body. Arms swoop over to one side. And along this idea of opening up and stretching, we want to stretch through the torso, through the arms, until you end up pulling that far foot off the ground, just momentarily. But have a sense of stretching everything, even your muscles, but something deeper than your muscles. Something deeper and finer than your muscles. And that's the connective tissue and the fascia. Basically, it's the white tissue of the body, not the red tissue. It's not the red beefy tissue that we want to work. It's the white refined tissue. It's a cleaner source of energy and power, and less obtuse, less crude. Again, just do the best you can to use something other than just muscle effort. It's a sense of lengthening, sense of lightness, fineness. Long spine, released abdomen. Once in a while, remind yourself about the back of the neck, lower back. So you're picking that leg up off the ground with something other than the leg itself. Release the abdomen. Okay. And then as we go further with this exercise, stretch, 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 open. And then this hand rotates up and extending through both arms, opening both shoulders and plopping down into that position. Rolling to the other side, opening, opening, opening the whole way, opening, stretching until you pull that foot up. And then you rotate up, keeping the shoulders relaxed down, equal spiraling out through both arms and hands, plopping down to the center. Hang the spine, hang the tailbone, open the back of the neck, release the abdomen, spiraling up, so this spirals straight up. And enjoy the opening of the body and the joints. Spiraling straight up with the hand and then out. See how long your arms can be and open your shoulders can be as you move through. Now here, I want to open the spine up vertically. Vertically down the leg, vertically up through the head. And that's why this arm goes vertical. Rotates, this arm rotates vertical, but really it's spiraling up vertically up through the spine. So it's long upward as well as widthwise. So here I'm spiraling up and therefore spiraling out. So I'm spiraling up through the spine, through the head, lengthening, opening the spine. Spiraling straight up the spine. Using less muscle and more intention. Every movement, every millimeter is another opportunity for opening, stretching, lengthening. Okay, back down, the elbows in front. And let's take that into Hami no Kamai. See if you can keep the same feeling. Keep the shoulders open. Breathing in, switching, breathing out, sinking, opening, lengthening. Now, each time you switch feet and settle into Hanmi, send your mind further out to the horizon. Each time you settle, sink, and expand and lengthen, send your intention further out past the horizon. So if you're out 100 miles, next time you're out 200 miles until you're past the horizon, and then continue pushing your intention further and further out. Each time you switch Hanmi, it's another opportunity to push your intention further out. And further out yet. Back of the neck, open and straight. Lower back is straight. Release the abdomen, release the shoulders. Push the intention out even further. Now, you're pushing your intention out so far, way out to the ends of the universe, way out to the ends of the universe. You're pushing your intention out so far, it comes back, hits you in the back of the head to continue going forward. You're flowing your intention so far out, it comes back from the other side. It comes back from behind you to return to you from behind. So far in front, it's immediately returning to you from behind. So far infinitely in front, it returns to you immediately from behind. So that front, forward, and behind become completely one line, completely connected. The sending out is also the returning back from behind. It becomes one. It's connected. Okay. Same feeling for Minucci. Go further and further out with your intention. Just a quick mechanical thing that we had talked about the last little while. Shifting the weight down the front hip, down the front leg, as opposed to lurching forward. So don't think of moving your body, certainly your upper body forward. It's just shifting the weight down the front hip and front leg. That'll keep you nice and centered and not top heavy, not leaning. But longer and longer arc. Energize the Tegatana, the hand blade, right through the edge of the little fingers. Energize that just as you energize the outside edges of the feet. Energize the outside edges of the arms. And you're just dropping your weight down the front hip. Release the abdomen and send the arms and energy further and further and further out. Until it returns to you from behind. Release the abdomen. So now you're no longer stuck in one spot, one time in one place, one little particle spot. You're forward and back. More you extend and freely flow out yonder. forward, more immediately it returns to you. Feel free to switch legs whenever you like. Hang out into the ground, settle, align, and then flow out. The flowing out leads the body movement. You're moving because of the flowing, the intentional flow. So now bring that into it. You're not moving and doing this intentional exercise. You're doing the intentional exercise, you're doing the energy work, and the body is moving because of such. You'll find it's easier or you do better when you release the abdomen. More and more, we can take the physical stuff out of it, the contraction and the trying and the doing, and just do the being and the intention, the relaxing with the clear intention. Take the muscles out of it. Can you feel it return from behind? Send it further and further and more freely outward and forward to return from behind.